Welcome to the Horror Unmasked podcast,
where we unmask the monsters and
explore the lore.
I'm Amber.
And I'm Lily. Today we will be dissecting
Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Let's sink our teeth into it. In 1462 Transylvania, Vlad Dracula, also known as Vlad the Impaler, comes home from battle against the Turks.
In classic fashion, lots of impaling.
While he is away, Elisabetta receives a letter that Vlad has died in battle. In her grief, she commits suicide by jumping off a cliff and into a river. After coming home, Vlad finds his love's body and stabs the cross in the chapel with his sword, which begins to spew blood. Vlad then renounces God and the church, drinks the blood that started flowing through the room, and becomes what we know as a vampire.
It then goes to London, 1897, 4 centuries later, and we meet a strange man, which we will come to know as Renfield, in a cell, talking to himself, speaking to an unseen master.
We then see a different man, Jonathan Harker, who gets a job and plans to travel to Transylvania to close the sale of properties that Count Dracula was buying. In a garden, Jonathan tells his love, Mina, about his new position and discusses getting married on his return. Overcome with sadness, Mina tells Jonathan that she doesn't want him to leave, but he reassures her that everything will be okay.
They kiss, and a peacock feather transition later, he is on a train, off to meet this count. One of his other ride companion gives him a cross for protection. John arrives at the castle, and Dracula is there to aid him in settling in. They sit to dine, but of course Dracula doesn't eat, as he has already eaten.
Eventually, Dracula finds Jonathan's picture of Mina to see that she looks exactly like his lost love, Elisabetta. Out of curiosity, Dracula forces Jonathan to write letters to Mina and tell her that he's going to stay in Transylvania for a little while longer, as Dracula plans a trip to England to find Mina.
It cuts back to Mina as she is typing. She was reading a dirty book, possibly the Kama Sutra, and her friend Lucy shows up asking questions about her and John, and confesses they have only kissed. Lucy has a party and clearly is not afraid to seduce all the men who show up, and obviously she is also meaning to choose a husband, but is clearly having fun with it.
During her party, we meet the 3 men that have caught Lucy's interest: Arthur Holmwood, Dr. John Seward, and Quincy Morris.
We see Dr. Seward at the asylum with Renfield as he tries to press him for info about why he requests strange things like cats. But Renfield becomes enraged and attacks him. It goes back to John telling of a letter about the strange things in the castle. Dracula shows up, and John, who didn't see him in the mirror, is surprised and cuts his neck shaving. Dracula is surprised by the blood and warns of being more careful as he takes the blade and slyly cleans the blood off with his tongue. He sees the cross around John's neck and is scared and tells him not to put his faith in trinkets of deceit.
Wolves begin howling outside, to which Dracula calls the sound sweet music and vanishes, only to reappear outside, climbing down the castle wall on all 4s.
John knows he is a prisoner and hopes to find an escape. However, he falls victim to the brides of Dracula, who, let's just say, start to have their way with him, and he is into it, and they somehow melt the cross around his neck. But just before things get too steamy,
Dracula appears suddenly, reprimanding his wives for their actions towards Jonathan. He then offers the women an infant to feed upon. Fast forward 3 months later, Jonathan is still not back from his trip to Transylvania. Mina has received Jonathan's letter and is still very worried. As she is still staying with Lucy, Lucy runs in excited about her engagement and can't wait to tell Mina.
A boat is seen on the sea in a storm, with what is clearly Dracula with boxes of dirt from his homeland, as he cannot be far from it for too long. The sequence continues with flashes of Dracula, then to Mina and Lucy running through a hedge maze, then back to the boat where bad stuff is happening, like murder and mayhem. It goes through a scene of something traveling fast, and it reveals a beast that is a werewolf version of Dracula. Lucy is drawn by it and finds herself in the very deep and steamy grip of the beast, which takes full advantage of her, to the point of biting her. The creature flees when it sees Mina.
Naked Dracula pops out of a box. Now dressed, you see him roaming the streets of London looking for Mina, when he suddenly finds her and whispers, "See me."
Girl is swept away too hard.
Introducing himself as Prince Vlad, Mina at first dismisses him, but feeling guilty about their first interaction, Mina then decides to show him around town as a form of an apology. It is clear that Mina is also very drawn to him now. In the next scene, Lucy appears to be in a wedding dress, as Dr. Seward comes in to check on her. Lucy says that all of her senses are heightened, to which Dr. Seward takes blood samples. Because he cannot figure out what is going on, he decides to call a friend.
At the same time, Mina and Dracula are at a show, and before he can bite her, a wolf shows up, and Dracula stops it from attacking Mina. Mina gets a chance to pet it with her gloves on. She is a monster for that. And too sensual of petting, but I digress. She knows she's doing something wrong by seeing him.
Cut to a man studying a bat, clearly in the middle of a lecture about blood and syphilis. He's abruptly interrupted and receives a letter, causing him to leave immediately. We then see Jonathan being held hostage and sucked dry by Dracula's brides when he decides that he must escape. Then, at Lucy's bedside, we see Dr. Seward, where Van Helsing, the doctor he had called upon, bursts into the room as Lucy is in the middle of experiencing a fit of some kind. They attempt to start a blood transfusion when all of a sudden Arthur Holmwood, Lucy's would-be husband, appears and offers up his own blood. After this event, the boys step outside, and Van Helsing is left to ponder the idea that what happened to Lucy is supernatural.
The scene changes, and Mina is drinking absinthe with Dracula on a date. It is like a dream sequence. Mina hints at possibly remembering or knowing Dracula and his home country. There is an odd emotional scene where Mina is almost recounting the events of Elisabetha's death, and Dracula turns her tears to diamonds.
In the midst of their love affair, Mina gets a letter that Jonathan is at a convent in Romania, and will wait for her to go there so that they can be married.
As Lucy is deteriorating, she now has started to act strange, and she is starting to grow fangs. As she tries to bite Quincy, who was visiting at the time, Dracula gets a letter from Mina and is heartbroken, as she has gone off to marry John, and Mina seems upset to leave Dracula.
Van Helsing, in his research, discovers that Dracula is the one who affected Lucy and is excited about his chance to kill him. At the same point in time, Mina and John are seen getting married in the Romanian convent. Also, Dracula curses Lucy to the same fate as him, turning into a wolf, attacking and killing her. Lucy is then entombed.
Once they return from being wed, Mina is still thirsting after Dracula, even though she has a husband now. The collection of Lucy's suitors and Van Helsing are at Lucy's tomb and uncover that she is out of her resting place. She then appears walking back in with a child, attempting to feed. Van Helsing restrains her with the words of God, and then has her would-be husband, Arthur Holmwood, spike her in the heart while he decapitates her. Dracula is not happy.
When Mina and Jonathan return to London, Van Helsing bluntly tells them about Lucy's death over dinner. Van Helsing asks John if he drank any of the bride's blood while he was trapped in Dracula's castle. When Jonathan tells him no, Van Helsing says that this is a good thing, since this means he didn't infect his blood. Jonathan realizes that he knows where Count Dracula is, so he begins to work with Van Helsing and Lucy's suitors to kill Dracula. The men then begin the hunt to find and destroy the crates with the dirt from Transylvania.
Spoiler warning ahead. Please skip. Mina goes with Dr. Seward to the asylum, and she decides to speak with Renfield. He wants to protect her from what is coming for her, but he is also still enthralled by Dracula. The boys destroy the boxes, while Dracula kills Renfield for betraying him. Then he goes after Mina. She offers herself to him, but realizes he is dead. She asks who he is, and he reveals he is Dracula. She is upset by it, but still succumbs to his trance. He bites her, and she drinks of his blood, but Dracula loves her too much to turn her, but she forces him to let her drink from him.
Suddenly, the band of men burst into the room and try to kill Dracula, but he turns into a bunch of rats and gets away. Dracula, knowing he can't stay in England anymore, attempts to go back to Transylvania. Because of a psychic connection to Mina, the men know exactly where to go and hope to beat him home. However, Dracula still has the upper hand and gets back to Transylvania faster than the men, but just barely.
While the men chase after Dracula's box of dirt, Mina and Helsing stop to camp, but she has a physical response to Dracula being so close and her falling farther into death. She attempts to seduce Van Helsing, but he stops her, and the brides, who have been egging her on the whole time, attack the horses, stalling them. But in the day, Helsing finds them and decapitates them in their sleep, tossing their heads over a bridge. Mina's connection makes her want to protect Dracula as he is being pursued by the boys, so she starts casting a spell to mess with the weather. The scene erupts as they meet the box where Dracula lies, and a fight breaks out. And with mortal blows done to Dracula, Mina tries to defend him. John has to let Mina and Dracula go, as Dracula is dying, and in the end, all he wants is to be free. So she finishes him and is freed from the curse. Then she abruptly beheads him. The end.
For this movie, we had director Francis Ford Coppola. We had our main actors, Gary Oldman, who played Count Dracula, Winona Ryder, who played Mina Harker and Elizabeta, Keanu Reeves, who played Jonathan Harker,
Anthony Hopkins, Professor Abraham Van Helsing,
and Sadie Frost as Lucy Westenra.
Then we have our Tom Waits as R.M. Renfield. We've got Richard E. Grant as Dr. Jack Seward. Harry Elwes, Lord Arthur Holmwood. Jesus, I could not have butchered that worse. And then, obviously, Billy Campbell as Quincy P. Morris.
Mm-hmm. This movie was released in 1992, November 13th. The budget was $40 million, which is crazy.
Compared to today.
Right. Compared to today and other movies that are, like, really high up there. Yeah. In the box office, it got over $215 million.
Yeah.
Which, again,
yeah,
crazy. And on Rotten Tomatoes, it got a 78%.
You know,
honestly, I think it should have been lower.
Good enough.
Good enough. I don't understand how it got that much money and has a 78%.
Well, because there's so many adaptations, versions, and variations of the story of Dracula.
Yeah. Alrighty.
So, this has got to be probably the, would you say, most confusing film to watch?
Oh, yeah. I didn't know what was happening most of the time.
99% of it. No fucking clue.
I literally remember sitting there asking you, do you know what's going on? Because I do not. And I felt so validated that you also
nope.
were not quite
no
sure.
Clue.
And what I think is so funny about that is when we try to tell your dad what is going on here, and he was like, what's confusing about it?
He's like, yeah, what are you talking about?
What do you mean?
It makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect sense. And, I went to go ask my dad, too, and he's like, what do you mean? It's it's perfect.
I'm sorry. Have you seen this movie in a while? Because
right. And I felt so bad. I was like, that was one of the not best movies I've seen in a long time, and my dad was so offended because it's one of his favorite movies ever. He's like, it's one of my favorite movie book to film adaptations, and I felt so bad saying that to his face. But
oh my god, in reference to the concept of the book, holy shit. Okay, so of the two of us, I'm the one who chose to read it.
I was going to
but you
my
forgot.
My ADHD got the better of me.
But yeah, so I read the book, got it a lot. It's actually set up as journal entries and news clippings and all that kind of stuff. It's all of that. But okay, the best way to sum up the difference between the movie and the book is it is as if someone wrote down a couple key moments and handed it to two different people. And one made a raunchy supernatural thriller, and the other one made a supernatural drama. The two are only so similar, but I would say the book is better.
Aren't they usually?
But the difference is that I didn't hate I'm not one of those people who's like, the movie fucking sucks and the book is always better. I'm not that person. I've never been that person. But personally, I didn't hate the movie. The movie wasn't that bad. It was just...
Honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you. I was sitting there the whole time being like, when is this over?
Oh, shit.
Yeah. I mean, I love the fact that, I got to watch Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves and Gary Oldman and, all these amazing people. But Not that I realized it was Gary Oldman until afterwards.
Yeah, you did not even realize it until after. Because, like, really, the biggest thing that changed, in my opinion, is that there was a romantic relationship between Mina and Dracula.
Yeah? That's not in the book?
That's not even the book at all.
Oh.
It never even happened once. There's no remote interaction between them other than,
so then,
like, that literal end moment time when he bites her. But instead of her, like, being all like, I want to drink of you, like, that, no, that does not happen. It is a completely forced experience. She's not in control, and she's not happy about it.
So then, how do they justify him going all the way
So
to London? Or is it just, oh, I saw a picture of...
Yes, it literally
okay, I
is.
saw a picture of
I
her,
saw
thought
the
she was
picture.
beautiful, wanted her badly.
I saw the picture, and oh shit, I'm going. And
If
there's
that's
a chance.
not some stalker ass.
Yeah, it's very creepy.
Creepy stuff.
The biggest difference also is that the movie feels like it's constantly towing the line between, is this reality or is this like a dream happening?
Right.
And the book, it's fascinating the difference between the book and the movie, because 90% of the book, I would say, maybe not 90%, but maybe like 70 to 80% of the book is actually focused on Lucy.
What?
Yeah. And the whole time that she's dealing with this, like, these things, and Dr. Seward has like a massive impact, and he's constantly in the story.
He's like not even in this movie.
Oh yeah, it's him, Van Helsing, and Lucy are essentially, I would quantify them as the main characters in the book, because
Mina and John don't even matter.
Literally
really.
the first 4 chapters, I would say, but between the first 3 to 4 chapters, you get Dracula. Then he drops off the face of the earth. And all you know is that there's like something happened to Lucy. Obviously it's Dracula, but you never see him or really interact, or it's like off in the distance. And then it's not till like chapter 21 or 22 where Dracula like reappears finally.
That's so strange, because when I was doing research on this, like, a lot of people were saying that this was the closest book to movie adaptation of Dracula
It is.
that has ever existed.
It 100% is.
But you're saying it's not even the fucking same.
But it is the closest.
Yeah.
That's the problem. It is the closest, but it's also so inaccurate. Also, no raunchy weird scenes. Not even anywhere in the book. There is no raunch to be detected in the entire book.
Which
ever.
I think is hilarious, because Francis...
There's no sexy Keanu scene with some sexy vampire brides.
So this movie, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, said that this was his first movie he had ever done that had like sensual sexual scenes like that, because he was squeamish about them. So he said he left it all up to the women, and if they didn't feel comfortable with what they were doing, they simply wouldn't have done it, because his mom, this is so wholesome, his mom told him to respect women. So then when it actually came time for Dracula's brides to like play their scenes, their nude scenes, the entire crew was too embarrassed to even ask, until like a stagehand finally asked them, and they were happy to do it. Because it was in their contract, so they were like, yeah, we'll go. We'll be naked.
Oh, yeah. FYI, lots of nipple.
Lots of nipple. That's...
Men nipple, women nipple.
Just nipple. That was definitely... In our midst of confusion watching this movie, that was pretty much the only thing that was like...
It was uncomfortable to watch a little bit because of it.
It was a little uncomfortable. We were sitting here like, so many nipples, and bouncing titties.
It felt like sex and sexuality
for no reason,
the main focus of the film,
and sometimes for no reason.
Yeah,
I told my dad that, and he was like, "What?
Like, why the fuck that Werula was like raunching up on Lucy? Werula.
That sounds too close to areola.
Like, no, Mina, you can't see me like this. Fucking your best friend.
It was so stupid. I was so confused. I was like, isn't he there for Mina? Why is he having sex with Lucy? Also, why is he a wolf? Is this a whole other story?
I know.
I'm so confused.
It's so confusing. A lot of the original, like lore with Dracula is that him and
Yeah.
werewolves and wolves in general are actually connected, that they're
Mhm.
related to some degree with each other.
Shout out to my dad, because he did give me a lot of information, and that was one of them. He was like, yeah, he's in this version, he's able to transform into lots of different things. And that's where it finally clicked for me, like why we saw a giant bat and all those rats and
And
the
a wolf.
mist and a wolf. And I was like, oh, so it was him the whole time.
Yeah, it was him the whole time.
And that didn't actually click for me until my dad said that.
Yeah.
And I was like, ah, got you. That makes a lot more sense. Because before I was just, why are there so many weird things happening for no reason?
Yeah, and I mean, even the beginning of the it's almost weird because the beginning of the movie almost betrays the idea of it being concise, because there's like this battle and he finds his love of his life dying, and it's this like really intense visual of betrayal in regards to his connection with religion and the church, and why he ends up like, you know, going against all of it and becoming this cursed creature. It's definitely fascinating.
Yeah, which leads me to the lore part of this. Okay, I did a little bit of research about who Bram Stoker's Dracula is based on, and it's based on this historical figure. His name is Vlad Tepes. Teeps. Teepees. Who knows? Vlad something. Who ruled over Wallachia, Romania, in the 1400s.
Yep.
But before his rule began, like before he even did anything, Vlad was the second son of Vlad II Dracul.
Vlad Dracul.
Yeah. Who was a part of this group called the Order of the Dragon, which was created to defend Europe against the Ottoman Empire.
We're getting a history lesson.
Yeah, you're getting a whole history lesson. I went into the lore. So during his father's rule, Vlad and his younger brother were sent to the court of the Ottoman Sultan, Murad II, to assure him that their father would support the Ottoman policies. So, like, they were just sent there to be like, hey.
Yo, is stuff chill? Are we
cool?
Are you good?
Are we good? Yes. So his father sent him and his younger brother to go deal with that. However, when Vlad returned, both his father and his older brother had been assassinated.
Oh, shit.
By their own people.
You know, sounds very French revolutionary of them, yes.
Yeah. So they were assassinated by their own people, who were these nobles. I forget what they were called. Anyway, so Vlad then spent his whole life trying to take over his father's seat and destroying his enemies, which included the nobles that killed his father and his brother. And even his younger brother, who decided to go work with the Ottoman Sultan, was like, yeah.
Betrayals all around.
Well, honestly, it makes sense. These noble people that are supposed to be on my side just killed my brother and my dad. I'm going to keep working with these people. Why not?
Oh, yeah.
Vlad did not like that.
But then Vlad's like, fuck you for that shit.
Yeah, fuck you for that. So during his rule, Vlad put thousands of his enemies on stakes in the ground and left them to die, which is where he got his name, Vlad the Impaler. And that's his whole story.
Lots of impaling.
Like,
I mean, I even know that the castle in Transylvania that is suspected, or I don't know if I can't remember if they've got it like fully like, yes, this was the castle that Vlad the Impaler lived at, but he had literal like fake like chambers where it was literally just a pit of spikes so people would fall in and impale themselves.
Honestly, that sounds correct, because it says he put thousands of his enemies on spikes.
Oh yeah.
So
that was his shtick.
In order to get thousands, I think you'd need to dig holes and put spikes in them and just push people in.
But this is like inside his house. One wrong turn and your ass is like spiked on in a pit.
You know, his enemies were in his house, you know, killing his father and his brothers. So, you know.
Oh yeah. And it's so kind of like, you know, stepping away from the history side of it.
Yeah.
And the movie itself, there is a lot of shadow play.
Oh.
Lot of shadow play in this film. You know, not all of it the most beautiful. It's,
No.
you know, there's some interesting ones, especially the one in the office where very clearly it's a little delayed because it's supposed to be two different people
Yeah.
one's doing the shadow, which is why also the lighting is so harsh and intense in that, is because there's backlighting for the back of the wall for the shadow man version of Dracula, and then lighting for them, so it's even worse on the back. But yeah, the whole like creepy arms reached out shadows, and you know, the shadow goes off one way while Dracula appears on the other side.
Yeah.
Hands traveling, you
Lots
know,
of practical effects.
lots of practical effects for this. But also that's indicative of the time, as the film did come out in 1992 in November. It was actually released November 13th, 1992. And yeah, they also used a lot of miniatures. They used miniatures in the film.
For what?
So
part?
like the train scene when he's like on the train and he's talking about like, oh, this is like where I'm going, this is what's going on. That, and you see like clips of like the train track and stuff like that, and like behind the cart that you see our sweet baby boy Jonathan Harker, Keanu Reeves, that background and also that train track that you see are miniatures that they're using. And they also used, I think they used in some images the use of miniatures for like the castle, like not the castle, but the in the later scene where the boxes are being kept, like that dilapidated building has its own little set piece as well that is in there. I do also like the idea that they made Dracula move like he's floating.
Oh yeah.
Because it definitely adds to the creep factor. And the like all of a sudden weird lizard twitchy as he's running down the wall.
The weird lizard thing did get me. Honestly, I thought it was kind of funny.
Yes.
And none of this movie was scary to me.
I agree.
Get that it's horror, and maybe for the time it was probably very different and very scary for that time. However, personally, nothing.
Oh yeah, I feel like it's just like everything, like during the time, because of the effects, that was like the most up-to-date kind of stuff that was going on. But yeah, what's actually kind of fascinating, so right now, so the whole scene with the boat, because we don't really know what happened specifically, like even in the book they do not describe 100% what happens. Like they give you snippets of like what the captain had written, but it's not a lot of information. In the book, the boat literally crashes onto the beach because there's literally like a dead body that's been like cut, that's just kind of hanging at the front, and the crew, for the majority of the part, except for the captain, I think, they're all dead.
Damn.
And so no one knows what happens, but there actually is a movie coming out called Demeter that is going to explain what happened on the journey from Transylvania to London. That's coming out.
Is that going to be a good movie, though?
Honestly, I saw the trailer for it, and it
looks the trailer's
really
already
good.
out?
Yeah, the trailer's already out.
Okay.
It looks really, really good. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be really interesting. And it's nice because it will add lore to what happened when there already isn't that much to go on to begin with. So it'll actually expand that story and probably use, I'm hoping, more of what the book has, because the book has more information than the film does. The film just has like a scene of a ship crashing with waves and like a bat version of Dracula fucking people up. So
interesting.
So weirdly enough, and also kind of sadly enough, there was a couple of unfortunate events occurred during the filming process. Well, and also the post-film with the reviews, as unfortunately our sweet baby Keanu Reeves, who played John Harker, got criticized for his English accent that he attempted.
Yeah, apparently. Okay, so first of all, Johnny Depp was actually very considered for the role of Jonathan Harker, because, Winona Ryder and him were together at the time and I think they had already done Edward Scissorhands.
Possibly.
But Depp was turned down because apparently he wasn't famous enough at the
You
time.
gotta be kidding me.
No, I'm not. That's exactly what they said. So Winona Ryder turned to Keanu Reeves, who was then criticized as having, quote, the worst English accent in recorded film ever.
That's so sad. And honestly, the really other kind of crazy thing is that they are okay now, but Gary Oldman, who played Dracula, and Winona Ryder, who played Mina, slash Elisabetta, they actually kind of had a falling out during the film.
Yeah.
They're okay now, but yeah.
So apparently Gary Oldman was going through a lot while filming this movie.
Going through a divorce.
He was going through a divorce with Uma Thurman, apparently, who I did not know they were even together. He was struggling with alcoholism.
Oof.
And
Yeah,
then obviously
harsh.
this difficult relationship with Winona was not great, but she was basically afraid of him on set.
She feared
him. Yeah.
On set because he was getting too into his role.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate. It does happen, method acting. And especially when you're going through some shit, it definitely does happen.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would love to see a modern, more accurate, because here's the other thing that the book also has that the movie does not. The movie, I realize, moves so fast.
Yeah.
So fast.
It's
compared
like
to the
months
book.
of time that passes and it feels like...
No, but even like the relationships of these people.
Yeah.
Like, you tell me if this sounds right. The Van Helsing I know from the book loves, cherishes, deeply respects, views Arthur as a son.
Wow.
Quincy and Jack are which is Dr. Seward, as his most dear friends. He sees Mina as this perfect person, and as Jonathan Harker as this brave and strong man, and he devotes himself. He loved Lucy through all of the tribulations that she went through. He loved her like almost like a daughter and mourned her loss. The relationships that were built in the book are so much deeper and actually have a fulfilling, like, they are dedicated. They make oaths to each other to promise that, like, no matter what happens, they will protect, and the idea that even when Mina becomes infected, not of her own accord, they dedicate themselves to protecting her and even promise her that if she goes too far and she has to die, then it will be by one of their hands.
That sounds so sad.
And she even requests that they read like a death, basically like a ceremonial death thing for her in case something happens. When the wafer, which we didn't mention in the telling of the film, but Van Helsing puts a wafer to her forehead in the film when they're at the campsite, but in reality it happens way before that, because he's trying to protect her, and when her body rejects it, she freaks out and is like, oh no, God rejects me, please, I love you, will you protect me if anything happens and I turn, I love you all and I want you to end me if necessary. I will not. Even Van Helsing, she even is like, I will kill myself if I have to. And Van Helsing is, no, do not kill yourself. Please don't remove this world of something beautiful. And it's such an emotional story. And even when, unfortunately, when Quincy dies in the, when Quincy dies in the end, it's emotional. Shit. there's a final story part in the back of the book where Jonathan and Mina have a kid and name him Quincy.
Oh,
Like, the child's name is a culmination of his friends, of all of their
this
stuff.
sounds
And
like a beautiful connection between
it's
friends.
such a good fucking
You know what this
book.
movie does? It makes it seem like these two girls who are just flouncing about, trying to get with a man, and all of a sudden she gets infected.
Yeah.
And then they go seek this random man who can help her.
Yeah.
And suddenly then they decide that they're going to go kill Dracula because that's why not?
Yeah.
And then
in the book,
I don't know.
I formed an attachment to Lucy because she was going through so much hardship.
They make her sound like such a
floozy in the
ditzy freaking woman.
Yeah,
like she's just running around.
Yeah. Where in the book it is like
trying to chase after men.
She cries when she gets the proposals. She's emotional and upset and is like, I'm so sorry. There is someone already. Like, she actually feels pity and she's like, please. And the men are so cordial and they're like, that is fine. Then please, may we be the best of friends.
That's so sweet.
And they dedicate their friendship to her and she's happy to have them as friends. And they all like kind of accept that she's chosen Arthur. And there's this sadness and despair as Lucy is slowly dying and they can see it happening.
Wow.
There's never a point where she like attacks them. And she doesn't
or
even
is having
die
an
the way that she
orgasm while
dies. She does not die the way she does in the movie. In the movie, she dies by Dracula killing her.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, like, yes, in the book, probably it is because of Dracula that she died. But like, she's worried about her mom in the book because her mom has a weak heart, and the subtlest of, they worry about the mom constantly being told something that would scare her to kill her. And on the last night of Lucy's life, like on that last end thing, Lucy, the wind is howling outside and she can hear a wolf howling outside her doors. And Lucy's room is filled with garlic as a protective measure.
Yeah.
And Lucy steps out into the hall like to call for someone to see if someone is there, and not wanting to wake her mom, she comes back to bed. But then a couple minutes later her mom comes in and she's like, I was worried about you. And her mom comes in and lays next to her, and there's this really sweet, like, you know, there's a loving moment between this mother and daughter before the wind crashes and something crashes and the window shatters, causing the mom such a fright that her mother dies in such fear because of having such a weak heart that her mother dies. And Lucy screams and calls for help, and the nurses come, and not nurses, but the maids come, and they move the body of her mother over, and the nurses, I keep calling them nurses, the maids run out and you know, to steel themselves. They get a drink, but then are tricked into drinking like laudanum tainted wine. And it's really sad because Lucy again loses more blood over the course of the whole time. The number of times that they've given her blood transfusions, every member of the party so far has given her a transfusion. Van Helsing, Dr. Seward, Quincy, Arthur, all of them have given transfusions. And it's one of those things where this last time, as Lucy's kind of there, she writes this note as like a desperate plea and puts it in her shirt, and then takes off like her necklace of like garlic flowers and places it on her mother as like a goodbye, and puts a sheet over her. And just kind of, it's this like sad, there's nothing left we can do about it.
Yeah,
and it's such a whole other world,
so
man.
That sounds nothing like this movie.
Like, Dracula's an actual villain.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not in the book very often. In the film, for some reason, they tried to make him this like hopeless romantic that was like, maybe he could be redemptive, but maybe not. And I'm like, sad.
Right. And then in the end, personally just ended up making no sense. The characters felt like they had no depth to them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this book, it really sounds like these characters had something to fight for
Mm-hmm.
and to live for, and it had nothing to do with,
Yeah.
like, I don't know, chasing after love that doesn't exist and,
Yeah.
like, some affair that,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, even for the character of Van Helsing, it's the idea that in the film there is this like really stark difference between this like really devoted book version of him and this really like kind of harsh and not thinking variation that Anthony Hopkins kind of portrays.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also strange because I remember, I think, mentioned to you that the director even was having difficulties with him kind of with Anthony
Yeah.
taking liberties
Mm-hmm.
with how he was doing the lines.
Right. But I would love to see a more modern version of this that follows that, because that sounds like an actually beautiful story and not some horror movie that they tried to put together for the time that was different or
That's why it's the difference between raunchy supernatural thriller and supernatural drama.
yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I was not expecting what we watched. I don't know what I
No.
was expecting, but I think I was expecting more something that like
Yeah.
something more. Just something more.
Like
that,
it bothered me how much Mina just easily like fell
Yeah.
for him. Like I'm like, are you kidding me? You've been like moony over Jonathan.
Yeah, the whole time I was like, why are we suddenly, and I guess it's like because it is my dad explained it as it is the reincarnation of his love, so when she's with him, all of a sudden she's taken back to that time. But I'm sitting here like, but they really, in the beginning of this movie, they make you want to fight for Jonathan and Mina because they just seem so in love.
And even when they first introduce when Dracula first meets Mina, it is creepy. It is not romantic.
It's not romantic.
Because
he literally whispers, "See me." And then she's not into it.
she sees him, but then he literally stands outside of the store she's in till she comes out
Yep.
and pretends to bump into her. When she walks away from him,
He
he's
follows
on
her.
the other fucking side,
He
already
follows
waiting
her.
for her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not cute. That's creepy.
That's
as
creepy.
shit. And it's
It's so funny to me that our parents really think that this is such a good movie. And honestly, I'm not going to bash them that this is their favorite because, you know,
I mean,
everyone
there's
likes what they like.
inspirations. Some of the inspiration came from the Nosferatu film, obviously,
Yeah.
because of the inspiration of you know, vampires and all that kind of stuff. But
What's crazy?
man,
My dad liked this movie and this book so much that he wanted to name me Elizabeta. My mom said no immediately, obviously.
Yeah, no.
But I could not imagine me being named that. Could you imagine me being named that?
it would make more sense if you were named Lucy.
Hey,
But you know what I mean? Like, if he was going to pick a character
book
that
version
mattered,
yes.
if it was to
Movie
matter
version,
as a character to matter, because even in the book, Elizabetha don't mean nothing. Like, you get to hear about it at the very beginning, and then
That's
it
true.
doesn't matter for the rest of the fucking film.
it's true.
Like, that's it. Like, in the book, it's a bare blip at the beginning,
Yeah.
and then that's it. And it's, oh,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
a lot. I'm kind of disappointed. However,
I mean,
if you're into the raunchy thriller type
Again.
movies,
it's not terrible.
no.
It's just when you read the book,
Mm-hmm.
there's just a level of emotional attachment
Yeah.
that is missing between the characters for the film to fully make sense. And I
Right.
feel like if they had changed up and gotten rid of some of the weird, raunchy scenes, like even it's strange that the fact that the director himself didn't feel comfortable with raunchiness. So I wonder how that played out.
Yeah.
And why raunchy was brought into it.
Mm-hmm.
Because without the raunchy and without the relationship of Dracula being created in the film, more of the book could have been expressed. Because there's a lot of Renfield in the book. There's a lot of them
and he's barely even in this
communicating.
movie. Another thing that's interesting to me that you're saying that like this movie has so much, that the book had so much depth and emotion between these characters. To prepare for the movie, Francis had the whole cast do a read-through of the entire novel before shooting any of the scenes. So I'm confused as to how they let any of that slide. How do you go through all of that emotion through these characters and then portray all of these things
in the film that don't make any sense towards the book? It definitely feels like, I think the only visual expression of the fact that they all read these books is the fact that they were dedicated to each other. They expressed some level of dedication between each other as characters.
I definitely see that through Van Helsing.
But not even Van Helsing. No, I see it through the guys. The guys in the film, like Quincy and Arthur and their immediate and Steward's immediate dedication to trying to fix
Lucy,
things.
yeah.
And even to the attempt to destroy Dracula, that felt more like maybe possibly from the book. But even the interaction of Mina on the cliff when they're waiting at the camp,
right,
and her being like having this weird moment and trying to seduce
Van Helsing
and kiss Van Helsing.
That was strange.
And like her casting magic does not
I'm like,
happen.
you are very young and you are trying to seduce this older man. I mean,
because it's the egging on of the other brides that draw her to it.
Hold on, let me rephrase that, because I don't care if you're an older person with a young, as long as they're of age.
Love is love. As
love
long
is love.
as you are of legal
age. That's all I give a shit about. However, it was just strange because she definitely looked, I'm not gonna lie, because I think she was 19. Winona was 19 when she filmed this, which is like just
a little
of age.
Yeah.
But who am I to say anything? If you're of age, you're of age.
Yeah. So I know that during the whole thing, so a lot of the kind of getting back into more of like the detaily bits, like the costumes and things like that associated with the film. Obviously, it's like period related. But
I love that they said the costumes are the sets.
Yes, the costumes are the sets. I have that here too.
It's beautiful.
It's fascinating because I'm trying to make sure I pronounce her name correctly. The designer is Aiko Ishioka. She made the costumes and it was absolutely amazing. The armor specifically, which has become literally the armor is the most iconic thing associated with the film, because it's the fact that it's meant to look like worms and also like muscle structure. It's definitely all supposed to give that demonic, like villainous with the pointed kind of horns appearance. But did you know that she was inspired by anime?
No way.
A lot of the film's costuming was actually inspired by anime.
Wow.
Specifically the artist Yoshitaka Amano, who at the time was working on like Final Fantasy and Vampire Hunter D. But yeah, it's definitely a fascinating combination of fantasy, because it included inspiration from Ryoko Yamagashi's Fairy King from her comic Asuka, printed in the 80s. So it's pretty fascinating to kind of suddenly be like, oh, this really dark fantasy was inspired by anime and like that kind of art style. And also the other thing that was expressed is that the costumes were specifically gothic, especially for Dracula. Like, he's a little out of touch. It's not 100% like accurate for the time that he's in, but he's trying. But it's also this like, the gothic side of all of their dress is the idea of them being different and weird. And one of the, it's actually kind of funny because when they were doing the designing for the armor, anytime the director was presented with a design, they wanted it to, and they would be like, oh, make it weird. Which really, what it was called is, weird became the code word for let's not do formal. So like, make it weird was like, basically take it from that more formality and bring it into that more fanciful, gothic, like rebellious side of it. But yeah.
And that's just for like in the 1400s area, or is that just for all of the
film, specifically for the film?
Yeah.
The reason why they had the costumes done in that very, because it's it's a hybrid of East meets West kind of concept.
Right.
So yeah.
I just love, right before Lucy is, when she's running through the garden in her red
Yes.
dress. That is probably the most memorable
Yeah.
for me. I mean, obviously the suit of armor.
Mm-hmm. Also, that
Dracula's
doesn't
wearing.
happen in the book. That does not happen at
But
all.
like
There's no running through shit. What it is,
that's what I'm saying.
is that
They
she
over
has
sexualize all of these
this-
women. That's all I gotta say.
literally throughout that whole part is she's sleepwalking. Also, Mina is not there for the majority of that whole time. She's not even interact. She's like there
I
for
love
the
how
very
they
beginning.
switched main characters
Like
completely.
Mina is there for the initial, oh shit, she probably met Dracula moment,
Right.
because it's she started having Lucy started having problems with sleepwalking.
Mm-hmm.
She got up in the middle of the night, left out her doors, and I guess before that point, when Mina and her were walking around, they went up by this chapel that had this bench, and Mina had said that she loved sitting there and showed Lucy it. So that night, Lucy, in her half asleep, sleepwalking state,
Went to
went
the
up
bench.
there.
Yeah.
And when Mina was like, oh shit, she's not here, ran up there, went to go there, she saw this figure leaning over her, and that was it.
Okay, so it wasn't some raunchy, weird
It wasn't
sex
raunchy,
scene
weird
between
sex scene.
Lucy and this wolf.
Nope.
Where it seems like Mina's a little voyeur,
Nope.
like just watching.
No, and no later moany, sexy, nipply scene of her like convulsing in the bed.
As
And
if
as
she's being like having an orgasm,
Yeah.
and Dracula seducing
While
her
they're
right
trying
there
to
while they're
give
trying to give
her
her blood
blood.
transfusion.
No, she's literally just so fucking weak that she cannot move. And they're like,
Aw.
she's trying to be like, my friends, I'm so happy to see you.
That's
It's
so
sad.
sweet.
It's so sad and sweet.
Aw.
And I'm kind of mad. That
Right.
I would like you said, I would love to see a modern adaptation.
All right, film companies, hit us up. We'll write a much better script. Not to bash this one.
Yeah,
Obviously, lots of hard work and really beautiful things were put into this.
Yeah.
However, just for me personally, not a favorite.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate all of the beautiful effects and
Oh my
costuming and
God.
design and everything.
And the
that went
special
into this.
effects were very
Very
beautiful.
good for practical effects.
Like even just the makeup.
And
like,
oh my gosh,
it
watching
was
videos.
seamless.
Watching videos of Gary Oldman being put into all of his makeup looks,
Yes.
it's insane. He was listing out all of the looks he
It's
had.
so
It
much
was
stuff.
so crazy.
Like even
the wolf.
simplistic
Ugh.
scene of when Dracula receives the letter that Mina's left to go marry
Right.
Jonathan, and
Mhm.
his face transforms into this like
Yeah.
vampiric,
Mhm.
sad, emotional, he's crying blood kind
Yeah.
of thing. Like that's a beautiful, seamless
Very.
prosthetic piece.
Mhm.
And it very strongly expresses a combination of that demonic but also vampiric
Yeah.
nature
Yes.
to him. And
Mhm.
there's this like powerful sorrow that's also in it.
I really thought that it was two different actors when Dracula's shown at the beginning versus when, he's old and
Oh,
he's
yeah.
got the red robes and the hair.
It'd trick you.
But it's still Gary
This-
Oldman, even when he's like finding Mina in the streets and he's got that young look and
Mhm.
his top hat and his glasses and his, he's looking good.
Yeah.
Like I really thought they used a completely different actor, but no. He did the same. He played every single
Oh
part.
yeah. And literally he Ullman was on set 3 weeks before they started filming so that they could go through all the
All the
prosthetics and
prosthetics,
stuff.
yeah.
It's like the amount of stuff that man
Mhm.
and
But
obviously the scariest one was the like that massive bat form
Oh
that he
yeah.
had. That one is
Because
labor intensive.
apparently, even after that, like when they were trying to shoot that scene, Francis had him go to like each of the cast members and like whisper creepy things into their ears just to get them into
Yes,
the mood.
but do you want to know why he did that? He did that because he was not convinced that the costume was frightening enough.
Wow.
He didn't think it was frightening.
Gary Oldman
So,
didn't think it was
yes,
frightening
he
enough?
did not. He literally was the giant bat one. Oldman was not convinced that the costume was frightening. So he intentionally did that That's the reason why he went around and did that.
But apparently Francis told him to do that because in an interview, Oldman was like, "Yeah, Francis told me to go around and do this.
No.
Oh, that's what I'm gonna do."
He did it himself. He did that
Really?
himself. It was not brought on by anybody. He literally, like, the director instructed him, but he went around and he made it so that the actors
Yeah, he had
would
his fun
have
with
more
it.
fear.
Like
He had his fun with it.
He was excited about it.
It was basically, here's a suggestion, and he was like, I'm gonna run.
He's like, "All right, bet."
I'm gonna take it and run.
Yeah, it was so funny watching Gary Oldman work with Francis. It was like watching a reality TV show.
Yeah.
The amount of times, just the bickering that they would have, like, I was sitting there like, oh shit,
Yeah.
what's gonna happen next? Is Francis about to fire Gary Oldman?
Yeah.
Like, what is going to
And
happen
I mean,
right now?
he really helped to create the persona for Count. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Oldman really loved making the ideas.
Yeah.
Like, he was fully into it.
Mhm.
And he's a very intelligent individual, and
Oh,
he worked really well to
Absolutely.
as the villain.
and the fact that he did all these things while going through
Yeah.
so much in his personal life, yeah,
Yeah.
props to him, honestly.
It was definitely. Oh, and the other fascinating thing I almost forgot to mention was, as they were filming, they actually used a lot of stop motion, time lapsey kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They really wanted to play with unnatural filming. So, like, the moment when she's dying and where, like, the blood explodes, but also there's visuals of, like, roses slowly decaying, and sometimes they have these really choppy things. The visual effects, they're usually strange and seem almost unreasonable, but they are very visionary. He wanted the tone to be faithful to the source material,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of funny. And
Sure,
at the time
faithful.
period it takes place, they did not use CGI
I know.
or VFX, like, at all. They really
Mhm.
wanted everything to be.
Isn't it everything
as
except like
natural.
that blue fire circle?
Yeah, it was very minimal,
Yeah.
but for the most part, it was 100%.
Mm-hmm.
He really wanted to make a classic,
Yeah.
and practical effect film.
That's, I think, maybe what makes this movie good is that it is like so practical and everything was like, it did have a lot of thought and effort put into it. It just,
Yeah, he even hired his son, the director hired his son Roman, because he was a magic enthusiast.
Yep, to like for the special effects and stuff, which is really cool.
Yeah.
A lot of people would probably be like, well, that's just because he wanted to give his son a job. Well, his son pulled it off.
Yeah.
So what you gonna say about that?
I mean, and that's kind of the whole point, is at the time, visual effects was strongly more practical at the time. But there was like a strong emerging visual effects and CGI. And so I really like the fact that and honestly, even modern films, they're going back to that, incorporating that stuff. And
Like,
it's really
I
nice
love
to
that
see it.
people use puppets instead of CGI because it just makes things feel
Mm-hmm.
so much more real. Like, I go back and I watch, let's say, like the old Jurassic Park movies.
Yes.
And like those dinosaurs
They were
look
real
because they used actual like puppets.
Shit, that T-Rex,
and it was crazy.
They had constant issues of it, like, leaking water from
Yeah.
the rain that they were making.
Right. Like, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I love that they're going back to that now because it makes things so feel that much more authentic.
And I mean, even they had fun with the camera angles, because even in that first scene when you see Renfield, the camera is from above, and he like stands up and reaches at the camera, like as if he's speaking directly to something that's in the room with him, but that's like up on the ceiling. Is pretty fascinating. The other one is the strong visual difference between, like, they very much made it obvious, like, when you're alive, bright, colorful, vivid. When it is scary and dark, it is dark and shaded with very little color. Like,
even though most of the movie is like,
and it definitely became that later, but during the first while of the film, when you would go back and forth between where Jonathan was to shots of Mina and Lucy, totally different atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it was a nice play on like good and evil, alive and dead feelings of the film.
Absolutely. I did want to talk about just another little piece of lore.
Yeah, go for it.
It's just vampires in general, which I know that there's so many things. There's so many adaptations.
There's so many different
We've got
variations.
Vampire Diaries. You've got Twilight. You've got what
True
else?
Blood.
True
You've
Blood.
got
So many things. Like, what are
other versions of Dracula?
many other versions?
Underworld, which is a whole other like. There's so
it's
many
crazy
variations.
how many variations there are.
Yeah.
But so when looking this up, it's so many different vampire myths, legends, characteristics. It's really hard to talk about it all. But overall, just vampires, undead, mythical creature, feeds on the blood of the living. But there are some legends that go back over 4,000 years ago that talk about bloodthirsty monsters. And so most of these vampire stories come from the Middle Ages, of people just trying to explain the spread of death and disease that there weren't yet medical reasonings for. The main one, tuberculosis.
Yep.
Which is a disease that causes people to cough up blood.
Yes.
Severe weight loss, pale skin, night sweats, fatigue.
Oh, yeah.
All those things that would make people believe that, traits of a vampire. So people will believe that the first person who, got the disease was a vampire, dug their body up, staked them in the heart, and because the body would be full of gas, oftentimes the corpse would groan and let out some
that's
sort
what
of
I
noise.
knew about that.
Yeah, and so that's what made people that was their spirit or the vampire officially dying.
Yeah.
But they didn't realize that, it was just gas and that's what bodies do.
Yeah.
And you can ask apparently what do you call them? The people in the coroners. Who are around dead bodies all the time.
Yeah.
They say that,
suspected vampires would be dug up, and because of the natural gases in their bodies, they'd be bloated, but people would be like, oh, they've fed, and then they would put, I know even in old traditions, they'd put, rocks. In between, so a chunk of rock in between the mouth to basically stop it from being able to do anything.
I just thought that was interesting. But there's another condition that also made people believe in vampires, and it's a blood disease called porphyria. Porphyria, which is basically a condition caused by genetic mutations that affect the production of a person's enzymes, which is involved in the heme synthesis pathway. It's a lot of scientific things.
A lot of jargon.
Yeah, but basically that affects the production of hemoglobins, which is responsible for carrying oxygen to the blood. Lots of scientific
technical
stuff.
speak.
But basically, there's a certain type of porphyria called cutaneous porphyria, which primarily affects the skin, which leads to photosensitivity, blistering, itching, skin fragility, and sometimes excessive hair growth. Which involves, the whole wolf
the werewolf thing. Yeah.
But that means people who had porphyria back then could only go out at night because the photosensitivity. Yeah. Their skin could have been discolored and scarred, which made them look more terrifying. And I'm not sure about this. I looked it up in many different places, but apparently there's a symptom of it that causes a person's pee to be red.
That's just weird.
But that made people believe that person would drink blood.
Yeah.
And they were peeing out the blood. Yeah. And I think that these are so funny because today, obviously, it's just
there's
diseases.
Still modern people who have, they are allergic to the sun.
Yeah. And it's just funny because the fact that these were just diseases and people didn't have the modern technology or science information that we do now really believed that vampires existed and weren't some myth.
Oh, yeah.
They just...
even in, there's a video game called Vampire.
Yeah.
Where there's a doctor. Mm-hmm. You play as the doctor, but the doctor's also a vampire. And there's a patient inside the hospital that I can't remember what it was called, but I think it's a real medical thing that exists. But basically, because she feels herself decaying, like she feels as if she is decaying, she believes herself to be a vampire. Because it's the act of feeling that like decay and needing to be revitalized sort of sensation that she herself, even though it's like a psychosis, it's she believes herself to be turning into a vampire.
Yeah. It's just funny because there are still things like bodies being dug up to this day where it's like, oh, people must have believed that they were vampires because of the way that they were buried, or the way, like, stakes in the heart,
the rocks in the teeth.
Rocks in the teeth. There was another one recently where it was like a scythe over the neck to prevent them from like, if they got up, they would decapitate. Yep. It's a lot. I'm glad that with tuberculosis they were already dead, so that nobody, was killed even more. But it's a lot. But there's really it's too much to look back on, because obviously
some vampires are cool.
Yeah.
Some of them are questionable. We're talking about you, Twilight.
What do you mean? Sparkly skin?
See, I like to not defend, but try to give a better reason as to why they are sparkly.
All right. What's your reasoning?
Okay.
I gotta hear this.
Twilight vampires.
Yeah.
The reason why they are sparkly, which kind of, honestly, it gives weight to my theory. Just by the nature of when Bella is turned and the nature of the visual of it going through her veins.
Right. And it looks kind of like icy. Ice. Yeah.
I see it more as it's crystallizing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because even the visual of the idea of like during the battle scene where like a head would be decapitated, it looked like crystal.
Like just, yeah.
So that it feels less like, it's almost as if their whole body crystallizes.
Yeah.
Versus...
That's why they're so cold. And that's
why they shine.
Why they shine. Yeah. And honestly, I don't know if it explains it in the books. It's been a really long time since I've read them, but...
No,
it doesn't?
No.
All right, then.
I haven't... I'm literally on the last book, and I just couldn't finish it.
Yeah.
But I think I'm far enough for them to have explained why the fuck they sparkle, but
I'm not gonna lie to you. Twilight, definitely a guilty pleasure. It's a comedy first,
whereas for me,
romance second.
I love Underworld and I love Van Helsing. Van Helsing is one of my favorite films, and I also like the just the general story of it.
I've never seen it.
What? I'm offended. Now we have to watch Van Helsing. It's a good-ass film.
I'm down for that. I'm always down to watch new things. I've barely seen anything ever, so it's
beautiful
that might be
ladies
really sad.
And beautiful men.
I'm down with that.
I
could get behind that.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Slay. Not literally.
Legit. But yeah. I love Van Helsing, but I think I like the Vampires of the Underworld series. They're pretty fascinating, including the werewolves.
I think I've seen...
You might have seen the first one. There's a lot of them.
The first one.
There's a couple of them.
Definitely not more than the first one.
I've seen, I believe, all of them. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating how they have developed the story so far. But yeah. I know it's kind of gotten on a weird tangent on other vampires, but you can't...
Right.
Oh, shit. That reminds me. We have I don't know if it's on our list, but I didn't know if we kept it there, but The Invitation.
Oh, yeah.
It's on Netflix.
That's a vampire movie?
It's specifically about Dracula.
Oh.
But it's like an alternative version of it.
Is it like...
It's darker. It's way darker.
Okay.
But not like... It's dark, but it's not like, the main character is a woman who finds out that she's like descended
another
of one
reincarnation of...
No. She's like just a descendant of like one of the families that has served the family of Dracula. Like just like you know, they've got like carpenters and all this kind of stuff, like different families that have slowly over the years just been aiding him.
Yeah.
And because she's the only girl, all of the rest of them have been men. Because she's the only girl, all of the women, all of those girls of those families are usually given to Dracula as a bride.
Damn.
So the other two families have already given their daughters as brides. So it's this whole interesting storyline of, you know, she comes and she's like, oh, I think she was basically orphaned the whole time. And she's like, oh, now I have a family, this large family that loves me and excited. And then she starts realizing, oh, there's some dark shit here. And, you know, this is off topic, but not off topic because I can't remember who his name is. But do you remember Descendants, like the Disney's Descendants?
Yeah.
You know the Captain Hook character?
Yeah.
He's Dracula.
Oh.
So he hot AF.
Yeah.
He's hot and dark.
That man plays hot and dark
Real
very well. Yeah.
But yeah.
Shout out to you. I forget his name all the time. He's in a
know.
lot of shit, though.
He is. He's in a lot. It's an interesting alternative adaptation
Mm.
to the story because it doesn't focus necessarily on Dracula. You don't even realize he's Dracula till later. It's pretty fascinating. So.
And I've reached the end of all my notes.
Same.
There's only like one thing, and that's where the movie was filmed.
Oh, well, go for it.
All right. All of the movie was filmed in California.
Not fucking shocked.
Yeah, not in England or Transylvania or any of these places.
In California.
But 3 different places, I believe. So it was at the Saint Sophia Greek Orthodox Cathedral. That's a mouthful. Sony Pictures Studios and Universal Studios Hollywood.
Hey.
But yeah, that's it. California, folks. That's where the whole movie was filmed.
You know, it kind of, I almost wish that we
It's
just
kinda
never,
underwhelming.
ever knew where films were filmed.
Right. Because that's
Unless
so
they were
underwhelming.
like really beautiful. Like, I'm okay learning that Lord of the Rings was filmed in New Zealand because it's fucking beautiful. But like learning that like this film that was set in Transylvania and England was filmed in fucking California is a little like underwhelming.
Yeah.
When you literally, these places exist. But I also understand maybe like logistics, expense, whatever. But it's just
they
kind
had
of funny.
$40 million.
They did have $40 million.
What do you mean?
Look, I'm trying to give them an out here.
There is no out. No out at all. I mean, sure, they made the scenes look real good.
Yeah.
But,
it
was all in 2 different studios and then a church or a cathedral.
And we ain't gonna talk about the story.
Well, hold on. I bet the only scene that they filmed in the Saint Sophia Greek Orthodox Cathedral was them getting married.
And possibly the very intro scene with the dead beloved.
I bet that's the only scenes that were filmed
I wouldn't
there.
be shocked.
I really wouldn't
shocked.
either.
But yeah.
If you know, put it in the comments, I guess.
Yeah, honestly, yeah.
If there's anything you would like
send us an email at horrorunmasked@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Send us an email if there's anything you would like to see from us.
What are your thoughts on vampires, honestly?
What are your thoughts on vampires? What are your thoughts on the formatting of this? We're always
Did you like Dracula?
Yeah.
Shit. What's your thoughts on the difference between the movie and the book?
Because I'm curious if you loved it.
Do you think modern day could actually justly give a good modern
personally
adaptation?
I think for sure.
Oh, I think for sure too.
If they did it correctly.
But who would be cast is
That's
the
a
real list
great
of
question.
curiosity.
Honestly, give us your cast list.
Yeah, honestly,
I'd love to know.
Go for it. That'd be fun.
Really fun. Maybe we'll talk about it.
Yeah, maybe in a future chit-chat episode.
In a chit-chat episode.
In one of our sessions, as they're so aptly named.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Just letting you guys know, a little heads up, our next episode is another film. This one will be discussing Hereditary.
Woo-hoo-hoo.
So, that'll be a nice, fun one.
Spooks and chills.
Oh, yeah.
Spooks and chills.
And to classically give the run through, since we've already mentioned our email, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Horror Unmasked.
Yeah, pronunciate.
Instagram and Twitter at Horror Unmasked. Listen on SoundCloud, Spotify, and iTunes at Horror Unmasked Podcast. And subscribe to our YouTube channel at Horror Unmasked Podcast. Like we said, drop us an email at horrorunmasked@gmail.com. We're pretty consistent with all of our social medias. Thank God.
Yeah. So basically, just follow us, or we will turn into Dracula. We'll curse.
We'll slowly
We'll renounce God and the church, and we'll become Dracula and
we'll
come and fight
appear
you.
as a raunchy wolf.
Yeah.
We'll
pop out of a box naked.
We'll say see me.
We'll say see me.
We'll drink some absinthe.
Yeah, we'll make you have weird visions.
I'll
Make
turn
you believe
your
that
tears
you are
to
our
diamonds.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will be then also taking those diamonds with me, as I'm the one who turned them into them, and I want them.
Right.
That's money.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, so
will you fear,
or will you fear not?